And my understanding is it's my understanding that we're going to be allowing 2-minute public comments tonight.
I wasn't sure.
I don't know. I mean, that's why we're talking about it. I think
It's fine with me. I mean, if there are 500 people, that might be an issue.
I don't think there have been.
Madam Mayor,
Yes,
it's 4:03 and we are live.
right. Thank you. How many public comment cards have you received, Madam Clerk? Madam Clerk, can you hear me? Madam Clerk?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I apologize. We are
Okay.
live.
Yes, thank you. About how many public comment cards have you received?
I have one public comment card
Kayla, I
and then one
still
that
can't
was
hear you.
sent via email.
Who said that?
Juan. They can hear me in chambers.
I can
Correct.
hear you.
Check your mic.
I can hear you, Shayla. Can you
Okay.
hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Commissioner.
Okay, I can hear Sarah, I can hear Kim, they can hear, Juan, can you hear us?
Sounds like.
Apparently not.
I don't believe he can.
Okay, well, we have to go forward. So tonight is the Miss Malika and Miss Stokes, how are you on public comment? We've only had one card, there's a couple people here. You okay with public comment? Normally it's a work session, so we don't, but we could.
I'm good with it.
Okay, Kim? Well, we have a majority anyway, so we're gonna have public comment. Okay, thank you. All right, so good evening, everyone, and welcome to the January 26th, 2022 City Commission workshop session regarding the beach complex. May I have the roll call
Mayor Betty Rush,
here?
Vice Mayor Herman Robinson,
Here.
Commissioner Sarah Maliga,
Here.
Commissioner Christopher McVoy,
Here.
Commissioner Kimberly Stokes.
Here.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to the, we're going to have the Pledge of Allegiance led by Commissioner McVoy.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all.
So at this point, I think I'm going to turn this over to staff.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Madam Mayor, and our commissioners. Today, we're here to discuss the beach complex and the elements connected to that, particularly the development of the pool. And as directed from the last discussion that we had, it was the interest of the commission to hear more information regarding our financial status and information so that we know what type of resources are available to contribute to this project, as well as other information such as discussing the way this can be financed and the method to do that via RFP, INT, or ITN, I'm sorry, and or other sources or financing mechanisms or tools. And then also we should have present, and Mr. Zimmerman is present from CPZ, who was the entity that provided previous designs. And so based on the information we talked about today, which we will also talk about some of the elements of the pool design and summarize the wants of the commission so that we can determine if a third design is warranted based on the current wants and needs of this particular pool design. So with that, we do have Mr. Bruce, who's Ms. Bruce Miller, who is here, our finance director, who has will present to you a financial overview of our city's discretionary sales tax and other resources so that you will have a full knowledge of where we stand financially and what resources could be used towards this effort.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Excuse me. Madam Mayor, and the commissioners, Bruce Miller, the state's finance director, for the record, and we are waiting for the presentation. Clerk, can you pull it up for us? I'm sure she heard you.
Madam Clerk, do we have the presentation from the finance team?
Oh, she's muted. I gave provide copies, and we do have it on flash drive in case.
Madam Clerk, can you hear us?
I can hear you. I will pull it up and share my screen.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We have copies.
We have them.
Plenty of copies.
It's coming up now.
Thank you.
No problem.
Mhm.
Can you see it?
We can.
Yep,
Okay. Just let me know when to go to the next screen.
okay.
So if you can go to page 2. So essentially, what I did is, this is the roll forward from the presentation that I did in April. So I condensed some of the slides. There's supplementary information at the back of this packet. So if you want to get into more detail, it's there for you to review. But tonight, what I would like to do is just give you an updated financial information. Again, a roll forward from April. That includes the revenue estimates and forecasts. There is good news in the forecast, which I'll explain in a little bit more detail. The expenditure review, then getting into funding strategy, and then talking about funding consideration. So if you turn to page 3, this provides basically a historical perspective on actual receipts received. So through fiscal year 21, September of 2021, we have received $12,700,000 in round numbers. And as you can see, each year we get a little bit more revenue than the prior year. And the good news is that in fiscal year 21, even though with the pandemic, we did outpace the prior year. For a little bit there, I was concerned that numbers would be dipping, but the again, actual numbers, $3.1 million, outpaced the prior year by approximately $500,000. So
Are we gonna do questions at the end or?
Yeah, I don't want to interrupt them. Let's.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So if you turn to page 4, what I did is a roll forward based on the activity. And as you know, as stated earlier, receipts of approximately $12,700,000. Number of periods being 67 an average.
What's a period?
There's a number of months that we have received.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the whole point here is trying to get a average, monthly average. And if I roll that forward to the end of the program, we're projected to receive $22.7 million as compared to the original estimate of $21 million. So everything being equal, and it never is, but everything being equal, just a straight line analytical review of what we originally projected to what the revenues to date over the last 67 months. We're looking at a $1.7 million increase. So that's the good news. And that we might have a little bit more to borrow again, so spend depending upon what the final decision is. Now, the expenditures to date, we have spent $7.3 million. And again, the detail supporting this is all in the back if you want to get more in more detail. But studies and designs of approximately $365,000, public safety equipment, cameras, et cetera, $355,000, parking initiatives of 2.5, Parker Commerce of 2.9, road improvements of $1 million, and IT infrastructure of $200,000. If you compare this presentation to the one that you received in April, what you'll see new is the road improvements of 1 million and the IT infrastructure of 2. That was not in the two-day analysis prepared for last year. The discretionary sales tax, again, this is old information, dependent for everybody's familiarity as we talk through. We borrowed a total of $5.1 million. So the general fund received $2.8 million, the beach fund $380,000, the golf fund $75,000, the general fund $1.5, and the IT information technology fund $350,000. Again, for a total of $5.1 million. So those, again, we borrowed against those, so we're paying that back out of the proceeds as we go forward. But it's a commitment, so these are the lines there. Mark, sales tax revenues through the process on page 7. There's a remaining $3.5 million. Street maintenance, essentially a $3 million, and IT of $550,000. So all that being said, that's the expenditures today. So if you turn to page 8, just a recap. And what you'll see is a lot of this information. Total estimated revenues, less appropriations to date, is the first full number. That equals $13.7 million. That theoretically, and subtract that, or from that number, we subtract the borrowings and the CIP from the projects. That brings us down to $9.7 million. I mean, that's a total of subtotal of $9.7 million. So we have available funds before other commitments of $3.9 million. Then we have the parking commitment of $2.4 million. That brings us down to 1.5. So then if you add back the $1.6 million of additional parking revenues, that brings us up to about $3.2 million.
Okay.
So with that, what are the funding strategies? So if we turn to page 9. As we reallocate current commitments, there's about, again, some of the IT and the street maintenance, about $3 million, almost $4 million. You could recommit those dollars.
That would take away from the street painting festival, right? That's okay.
Everything that we're talking about here, if you want to put it over here, you're going to rob it from some other activity. So reallocate current commitments. You could use PAYGO dollars. I want to be a little bit more specific here. PAYGO dollars are current revenues. Okay. So there's not a whole lot there. And this would be even further targeted to the beach fund. We're not talking about the general fund. We're not talking about any of the other enterprise funds. This is a beach project, beach and not enterprise fund, but revenue fund. So if we're talking about fund balances, or if we're talking about PAYGO dollars, revenues, we are talking about using beach fund balances and revenues. So use of fund balance, that is an option. As part of the strategy a couple of years ago, when we borrowed the working capital, we infused prior pay-go dollars with capital. We paid ourselves, reimbursed ourselves. So there are some fund balances that are available. But at the same time, there are a few things that we have to consider. The first thing that we have to consider is we have fund balance policies that we are managing through now. It's not just an open checkbook. We are putting monies for future purposes. So that would reduce the amount that we could put in. My bigger concern, quite frankly, is until we get everything stabilized, there are some funds that have very healthy reserves, and there are other funds that do not have healthy reserves. So in aggregate, we need to, until we get to that place where everybody, all the funds has good reserves, we need to aggregate those, because a hurricane event doesn't care about what fund you pull the money from. If we do get hit by a bad hurricane, we need reserves from anywhere and everywhere to get through that difficult situation. So that would be my first cautionary note. We really have to make sure before we get into the fund balance conversation or using fund balance, that we really understand what it is that we're talking about and the risk assessment that goes with that.
It would be helpful to know what the fund balance is and what reserves we need. It's not a pop quiz, but just in general, what is our fund reserve and how much do we need of that to make sure that we have enough for a hurricane?
I will have that.
Thanks. I figured you did.
Yes. There's the two pieces that we're waiting on is there's some GASB, generally accepted accounting, adjusting entries that we have to make to the year end. I'd like to report through the audit's efforts and the staff. The audit is coming along very swimmingly, if you will.
Speaking of the pool,
Yes. You called it.
how appropriate.
As long as it didn't take a nosedive.
Yeah, there you go.
So the enterprise funds, primarily the electric fund, has done very, very well. The electric fund was one of the ones that we're trying to rebuild year over year. So they've, it looks like they will, year-to-date results are very healthy. So all that being said, we are rebuilding fund balances across the board. And so it will be, the conversation will be a lot easier than it would have been 4 years ago. But again, I know I'm stressing over and over again. I sound like a broken record, but we really need to make sure that our fund balances are understood and that risk assessment is done. So we talked about use of fund balance. That next bullet is use of other available sources, ARPA funds, for example. I just throw that out there because there's a $10 million, $12 million unallocated fund, if you will, that we can use. But again, these are one-time revenues that we can't use really to supplement budgets. So if you use one-time revenues for ongoing expenditures, you're creating a structural deficit. So
It's one of the challenges of ARPA.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And then the last one, the last bullet on page 9 is to borrow against future revenues. And that's, again, we know that we might receive $23 million that we have. So we have available funds there. But I just want to point out that that's not new money. We're not increasing the pot. We're just grabbing into those funds earlier than we normally would have because of the borrowing against the future revenues. But it's not like we can borrow more than what the estimates are going to be, the revenue estimates are going to be. And the revenue,
And there's a finance charge on top of it.
and there's a finance charge on top of that. So you're not getting as much as you may. And most situations, when we talk to the financial advisors and we talk to the rating agencies, they're going to discount that total amount by some amount. They're not, because your estimates are just that estimates. So they're going to look at it a little bit with some cautionary eye to that. So if we can turn to page 10. So now I'd like to shift gears a little bit in that up to this point, we've talked about available funds and we talked about some strategies that we may employ to make this all work. But while we're looking at the pool and these revenue sources, we also have to remember that there are other competing needs. Okay, so what are those competing needs? Well, if we take a look at just the fiscal year 22 capital budget, thank you, page 10. The total unfunded request out for the next 5 years is almost $16 million. Okay. We know that up to this point in time, and that's just, I should emphasize this, that's $16 million is just for the governmental funds. Because
The microphone. It keeps coming in and out.
Oh,
Maybe it's just to come closer to it.
is this better?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right. So on the competing needs, this is a compilation of all the different capital requests that were identified in the fiscal year 22 capital budget that were not funded. And this is, again, just governmental funds. It does not include the enterprise funds, water and sewer, which are much larger amounts, but they also have revenue streams that are more flexible and therefore could support their own debt. So historically, the city has had a very difficult time keeping up with its deferred maintenance and its capital projects.
Apologize, Madam Mayor. Commissioner Maliga has her hand raised.
oh, sorry, we can't. Commissioner Malega, we're holding off questions until the end of Mr. Miller's presentation.
Okay.
Okay, just not to interfere with this chain of thought.
So, there's some debate relative to if everything's needed here or not. No, I understand that. But it does give you a pretty good litmus test of what needs are out there. And again, by historical perspective, that the city has not been able to keep pace with its needs. Deferred maintenance is growing and growing. And therefore, there's going to be more and more demand as we go forward. And I suspect that that demand will continue. And in the past, as evidenced by the recent borrowing against the revenues of the sales tax, that's what augmented the borrowing, the capital program 2 years ago. Last year, we didn't do a whole lot on the governmental funds because we wanted a expanded conversation on the different pots of monies that were coming in, how to use the different needs versus wants and all that kind of thing. So that we really have not drilled down to the CIP for the governmental funds. Take a look at the different revenue sources, they ARPA, PAYGO, fund balance, and sales tax. So we really have to do that in a comprehensive way, first, which would be my recommendation. When I say we need to, I should change that to, I would highly suggest that we take that step in the comprehensive analysis so that we can do that needs assessment and take a look at the different levels or sources of funds, I should say. So if you turn to page 11, the other part of that, if we talk about the CIP, we need to have a prudent, we have to make prudent and sustainable business decisions. And that's pretty much what we're talking about when it comes to capital. And as you may recall, we created a evaluation process where we could do this weighting and evaluation, where we look at project category, being an essential project, a priority project, cost savings, life cycle improvement. These are all different program or project type. We do a risk assessment. We do a financing assessment, a strategic plan alignment. Does this meet or fit into our strategic plan? Cost benefit analysis. I can't emphasize enough that cost benefit is an essential part to the decision-making process, because we do not want to get into a situation where okay, fine, we have money to build whatever it is that we're building, but then we don't have the ongoing capacity to support that. That's like buying a house that's too big. I would love to buy this house. Okay, fine. I can take my parents' will and buy a big house, but I sure as I can't support it. And so we really need to take a look at that as an issue. Are revenue streams sufficient? Are the future revenue streams sufficient? But we have to have a business model that can support what it is what we're doing. And on it, that goes across every single capital program that we do. What are the budget, operating budget impacts? The service levels that we're looking at. Are we consolidating services or expanding services? And then the community and economic impact. So these are all part of a very comprehensive and deliberate capital assessment. And again, the details on that are further back. I won't bore you with them, but they're at the end. So finally, getting to page 12, which is the last page of my presentation, before we begin into the supplemental information. Other potential initiatives that are not on the 5-year CIP. Okay, we talked about the $16 million. And that would also include that $16 million includes the ERP system that we talked about occasionally. The ERP system being a new computer system for back office operations. Really, I don't know if everybody remembers that conversation, but right now we use a system called Avalon, which is somewhat dated. We really need to start looking at the ERP, a ERP system, and that's been estimated about $6 million.
We've talked about, yeah.
Okay. But other things being coastal sea rise, master plans. Now, some of that money could be coming from ARPA also. So, some of the, I understand that some of this is piggybacking. Operating considerations. If we really think about it, it's analogous to the bond rating process. Okay, we need to be able to verify what it is that these, whatever we're planning, whatever that plan is, we need to be able to verify what that plan is for our own benefit. We just don't want to say, well, we'll build it, it'll support itself, not the word. We really need to do a deliberate process in that. So my final bullet, and I know there has been a lot of conversation, there will continue conversation on this project and everything that involves. But it's difficult to proceed with the procurement process until we really understand the funds, in my opinion. Okay,
Including business plan.
exactly, all of that. Okay, including sources and amounts, yeah, the operational impact. I'll let Valentina, who knows procurement inside out, and she has a very high acumen when it comes to that, talk about the procurement options. But yeah, I really would recommend that we spend a little bit more time before we get, it's almost like putting the cart before the horse.
Mhm.
We really need to understand what our financing schematic is, to some extent anyway, before we get too far over the typical skis. That being said,
We have some questions.
you have some questions.
I'm going to start with just one question. You know, there was talk, there's been talk for a few years of $6 million for the pool. And what is the status of that $6 million? I don't see it on the list of appropriations. I don't see it anywhere.
Well, the $6 million, quite honestly, is somewhat eaten up, if you will. So let me go back to where we are. And pull up the budget page. 8.
That was a number that was set aside from the income expected from city sales tax. It wasn't an actual dollar
Right.
in hand.
No, but-
It was a number on a budget.
Yes, sir.
So when you say it's been eaten up, it's been eaten up on paper. And we still have income coming in from sales tax that can, you know, is still there as in the amount of $6 million.
Let me,
Why, I just need an explanation of that.
all right, so the conversation of the $6 million, what that did not include was a commitment of $2.4 million for the parking.
What is that parking?
Yeah, right.
So there's no separation of, we, you know, when you talk about income from our oceanfront park, there's no separation of rental costs, parking costs,
This is
different leases,
Why I can't? This is a lease obligation.
weddings.
Now, this is a lease. Where is one? You'll remember. Hold on for a second.
On page 8, that line says less semicolon parking.
That contributed to
Supposed to say-
development.
It's a parking development that we owe a payment. Bohemian, thank you very much. Lynn.
That's our.
That's the Bohemian.
And how did that we get?
Hey, it's Juan. Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
Yes, thank you, Lynn.
Yeah, let's just make sure we're clear if we, when we throw things out into the universe, that we asked Bruce to put this parking commitment there, which is an unappropriated, because there hasn't been any commission action with the current board or the prior board, but it is a debt liability that's going to come true probably by the end of this calendar year. We've all seen how quick the Bohemian development has happened, and that 2.4 million in change was the commitment to, as part of the incentive package, for the 120 parking spaces in that parking garage. So the reason it's on here is as part of the sales tax, use of those funds, public parking is an eligible expense. So we wanted to make sure when you take a look at the, big picture, which Bruce talked about, CIP in general, that is still, a debt that we have to, wrestle with here in the coming months.
Over what period of time?
Sorry, I didn't hear you, Commissioner Robinson.
over what period of time, Herman asked?
Well, that payment is the upfront payment, and then there's an annual CAM that we're committed to paying. I think it ranges somewhere in the neighborhood of $70,000-$80,000 annually. So the 2.4 is a one-time lump sum upfront, and then there's the annual payment. And remember, that parking garage commitment tied into the overall parking, program, downtown parking study. Another big conversation that we still need to, have in the community. So, it's on here because again, we got it. We have to look at big picture and have everything out on the table.
Right, one more quote about the 120 spaces in the Bohemian, people will pay to park there? Or has
Yes,
that not been discussed?
that's the intent. Yes, those would be metered parking spots.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Okay, so whittled away our six, I mean, you know, I know that the 6 million, it's not $6 million sitting in a pot, bless you. $6 million sitting in a pot, but has, you know, has it been, is it gone? I mean, what's the situation? It's a little disappointing to hear that it's been whittled away.
Well, when I mean whittled away, is if you start with a $6 million projected availability of funds,
Mhm.
and you subtract out commitments, okay, or electable parking, that's what I mean by whittled away. Now, because again, the city is not flush with cash.
That is no surprise to anybody.
So this commitment is going to have to be paid one way or another.
So this commitment was made even though we knew that it would impact the $6 million for the pool.
As I just said, it has not been appropriated, it has not been approved.
But apparently it's a debt.
It's an obligation.
Well, I mean,
Right. Okay, so, I mean, the
We have to
reality
pay.
is,
But
Madam Mayor, let me
Yeah.
try to, we gotta be careful, make sure, because this, you know, we put things out there.
well, that's what I'm trying to.
In the time and place when the Bohemian Garage was considered, okay, and the incentive package was put together, and the idea of partnering with them in the parking garage, remember that was done under the context of, at that time in the city, we were exploring and going through a full comprehensive parking study, which at the end of it was going to create and identify a downtown parking program that included conversations along the way, metered parking, decal parking, parking garage or garages, okay? And part of those transactions as well wasn't about, you know, not committing 6 million to the pool. At that time, there was multiple conversations going on, but nothing had it. We never got to the point of appropriating, and then COVID hit. So $6 million, to Commissioner Robbins' comments, was earmarked right around the same time when that commitment was made to that debt. Now, one could say, okay, Bruce, take that 2.4 off the sales tax. We still have to figure out how to fund that debt. Okay, but because of the eligible use of the sales tax in public parking spaces is why you see the Bohemian parking garage show up. And in a way, on paper, it does whittle away at what we would consider potential for future use. Now, if you take the 2.4 away and you add it to the 3.2, now you're magically back, you know, above 6 million, if my math are pretty close. So I hope that kind of helps clear up any confusion or, you know.
it doesn't take away the fact that we're started with 22 million. And we talked about the cost of a pool of $6 million and that commitment for a pool. And so you've spent other things, but I think we're here to, and I appreciate the concern for the budget, but we're here to talk about whether we are going to even move forward with, improvements at our oceanfront park. And
Madam Mayor, I've had my hand up over here waiting.
and I had my light on.
That's the problem.
Sarah, so
We just started questions. I've got a lot of, you'll be next after Mr. Robinson.
The CPC contract, has that been completely paid for?
Yes, Mr. Zimmerman has completed his task order to date.
So any work going forward is going to be an additional cost.
That's correct.
And we don't know what the breakout of the income from the parking versus the I'm going to say, the leasing, the commercial leasing.
Is that, Commissioner Robinson, are you talking about current operations in our budget or future pro forma?
Real money. I'm talking about real money, you know, the cost that we have, the income that we have coming in from our commercial space at our Oceanfront Park. Because
we know.
We do know, yes. I don't think everybody knows. And I want everybody to know that the square footage potential that we're not collecting. That's all.
Well, yeah, I mean, we know that. That's one of our,
No, we don't. We don't know.
we know that it's not we're getting any revenue.
Yes, but what is the square footage that we're getting from the others? And maybe we could then put a guesstimate on that
Hey,
income.
Madam Mayor,
Okay. Yeah.
we have,
Are we gonna have a
See,
conversation?
we can't, three of us can't talk at once.
Well,
Let Juan, what were you gonna say, Juan? And then we're gonna go to Sarah. Juan?
yes, Madam Mayor, we can do a beach fund overview. And we have numerous times throughout the multiple beach workshops, more before you guys were elected. You know, we just started, with this body, have talked about what those rents bring in based on the square footage. We are aware of what the market would probably more than likely attract on the vacant space. It hasn't changed much. It's somewhere in the neighborhood of $15 to $18 a square foot for second floor oceanfront, and obviously, you would build that triple net lease, conceptually. So, to Commissioner Robinson's comments, we do know parking revenues that come in every year. We do know the rents and the CAMs and the property taxes and everything. And those things are covered every year during the budget cycle when we go over the beach fund.
they
And,
should be part of this conversation.
and yes, and we can talk about the beach fund in more detail if
We seem to be focusing on the budget concerns versus a pool conversation.
Well, I think they're intertwined. I think
They certainly are.
we can't, right. Which, it's wonderful to, and we've been sort of
We
focused.
don't have details that help us
We just,
talk about the pool.
Commissioner Malay.
I know we're going, she's right up. I see you when I see that little tiny hand. Commissioner Maliga?
Thank you. I have a couple questions. I don't recall, and maybe somebody can refresh my memory, us as a board ever having a conversation about taking out $1 million a year for 3 years for street maintenance and IT fund when we went through the capital budget last year. I don't recall that. So maybe somebody can help me out?
So the question, where did that come from?
The amounts are reflected on the CIP. And that's why I said earlier that if you do not want to carry, they were not appropriate. So you can recommit those dollars as part of the CIP process. Yes.
When were they appropriated? When were they?
They were not.
They were not, when were they,
They
what's
were
the term?
presented-
Earmarked with, I don't
They
know.
were kind of like earmarked before this commission.
Okay.
That was a spending plan because we do not have revenues for road maintenance.
Right.
And at the time, and I'm sure it's only gotten more significant, is cybersecurity. And we were going to pay for that infrastructure on this.
Okay.
But last year when we had the conversation in regards to budget, this was never talked about when we looked at CIP. This conversation was never discussed with us, from what I can recall, on our capital improvement projects. There was never a mention of penny sales tax. There was never a mention of, well, the prior commission thought this. And I'm wondering why this is being thrown into the mix now when we never had that discussion before.
Well, again, it's only, all I can tell you, Commissioner, is it's on the CIP. I would go through all the different categories of the different funding strategies, et cetera. Maybe I did not emphasize it sufficiently. That would be, definitely my fault.
During the budget process?
During the budget process. There was also a lot of information flowing back and forth relative to the capital and the operating budgets. So I can't definitively say one way or the other.
Okay, and then my only other question is for potential future funding sources.
Mhm.
I don't see anything listed for naming rights or sponsorship, because we talked about possibly doing that, getting people to bid on naming the pool for naming rights. And that could generate revenue. And then obviously asking the county for matching funds, because it is a county asset. I'd like to see those two things added for potential future funding sources.
And right along those lines, Commissioner, I was gonna add, again, I was in Washington last week. And I just kept hearing, health initiatives for children, which a pool would help children. Infrastructure, IT, broadband, that there's a lot of money that we've got to figure out how to get our hands on. Road improvements, I mean, the infrastructure, they're emphasizing that. So I agree with you that we shouldn't limit our vision to ARPA or the money we don't have, which it sounds like we don't. So I also want us to be creative about other funding sources, which, it's a time issue because we don't know when that all happens, but I think we should be actively looking for that stuff. And
I agree. Yeah, there's lots of money in this stimulus package that, but we don't get that directly. So we have to go.
Right, we have to
ask
spend
for
it, but there's other besides ARPA.
No, not ARPA.
The infrastructure, but even beyond that, I mean, really, they were throwing pamphlets at us last week. It was,
Yes.
I'm gonna bring them all in.
There is more money available in grants and that type of activity now than there has been in the last year.
Yeah.
But it's really, because we don't get a direct allocation, it's hard to budget for that.
So it seems, does anybody else have any comments right now? I see, yes, I do. I see a couple lights on.
Two things. One on the sort of a semi-answer to Commissioner Malega's comment on the CIP and the roads. I seem to remember from way back that we always had, and I read the number that sticks in my head was about $1.5 million was what Jamie said. That's just barely keeping even with the degradation of the roads. We all have remembered.
You mean a yearly
PCI
maintenance of
indexes
about
or
$1 million?
whatever those indexes are called. They're always going downhill. And I remember a number of about $1.5 million is pretty standard to roughly keep your head at water level. He would love to have more. And I think the community can easily point to roads that aren't doing well. So I think that is, I don't remember whether it was in the CIP discussion or not, but I do remember long-term, it is something
Well, we know we need,
you need to do.
Well, and if I may, piggyback on that thought, is that we have talked on many different occasions that the city, as you're aware of, had to do a borrowing for its roads.
Right.
Okay, and so by doing so, you're adding on additional costs, being interest.
Finance, right? It's almost doubles it.
Well, not quite, but
It's in the range.
It was 5 and 6%, if we look into the future. So my point being is you are much better off doing it on an ongoing basis
Than
waiting. Because you're going to be, not only does it get more expensive to do it in the future, the degradation of the road makes it more expensive, and then you're paying debt service. So you're paying three different categories of additional expenses if only you would maintain the road on some type of
ongoing basis. Yeah. My other comment didn't relate to roads at all, but I think it's page 8, basically. This $6 million figure has floated around magically, and it looks like gold bars in some of our heads that were in the vault somewhere and that don't evaporate and don't get stolen or whatever. But I suspect that and it was always kind of well, we don't really have that money, but it'll be coming in, and we've sort of set it aside. But if somebody gets there earlier with something else that's even more urgent, well, then we're probably going to spend out of it. And it seems to me that the realistic picture, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the realistic picture is it's not 6 million. There's not 6 million in any closet hiding anywhere, whether we said there was or isn't. At this point, a more realistic number is maybe 3 million.
Well, then,
Out of stuff that's,
What is that right now? But that does not include next year's income. How long does the sales?
no, that's out of the whole,
for the next 5
10-year
years.
22.
yeah.
And that's why I presented the information the way I did,
Mhm.
so that you can see the different components
Right.
relative to what has been obligated, what's hard, what's soft, type thing. So the CIP identified projects. Were those projects halfway up of 3.5 million? Were those funds appropriated? No. What they discussed, and they identified as part of a long-term strategy that we need to maintain. Yes.
Yes.
You can repurpose that money. It is totally in your right. And as I said, I think I said that earlier. You can repurpose those funds. You can reallocate those funds.
Except for the 22.460 for Bohemian.
Right, that one's pretty much, you could not pay your debt.
Again, so now you don't do a road program. Okay, or you don't do IT infrastructure and cybersecurity. What is the risk to that?
Yeah.
Okay, these are.
No,
all-
we understand
Yeah,
this.
exactly. So there's a yin and yang with every single decision that is put in.
So
That's very zen, Mr.
realistically,
Miller. That's very zen, Mr. Miller.
realistically,
That's
of
where I'm
this,
going right now.
That's where you gotta go.
of this stuff that doesn't have somebody reaching for it all and that recognizing that many of those reaches are pretty legitimate, whether they're appropriated or not, you know, we need the IT security, we need the roads, we need whatever these other things are. The unreached for is roughly 3 million. Is that a reasonable statement? Out of the whole,
Yeah, I
Roughly
think
22.
$3.2 million at the very bottom of the page is a realistic number.
Yeah.
Because if you keep everything in, and that's a soft commitment.
Right.
I feel very comfortable with the new revenues coming in. They go up each year. So, and the fact that, you know, the base for all intents and purposes, again, acknowledging that there are soft commitments or $1.5 million. So you add those two numbers together and you get the 3.2 million. And I think that is, you know,
Available funds.
a sound number.
and if one wanted to be very conservative and say, oh my gosh, the economy might go to heck in the next 5 years, you would take that 1.6 off
Mhm.
and say,
Or
if
reduce
we,
it.
Yeah.
or reduce it by some amount. So 3 is really a max. We hope
Right.
that the economy will go forward well and the projections will continue, but even that has some optimism built into it.
Well, yeah, and I was talking to
Realism, optimism.
yeah, whenever you do a revenue pipeline, okay, your revenue estimates have to be reasonable.
Mhm.
Okay, so when we do a revenue bond for the utilities, they have to be based on reasonable estimates and reasonable structure. The difference there is that this would be an ad valorem issuance versus a true revenue bond
Right,
that is of the
Yeah.
utilities.
it's a little different.
This is an ad valorem, and so it's really supported or backed by the tax base. So now we pledge the revenues. So if our estimate is of new revenue is $1.7 million and we only get 1.5, the bondholder is taken care of because it's an ad valorem bond. It's not strictly, it's not a true revenue bond.
I may have missed something, and I'm not suggesting it's a good idea, but we're talking about taking out a bond for the pool.
If you want to take future revenues, that's what you're.
Oh, pledge the future revenue bond.
That's what you're doing.
So that would be a GO, general obligation bond.
Right, that will-
Which doesn't really feel like a wonderful idea.
Well, that's why I said, you know, and further back, that you can borrow, but it's not new money.
Right.
You are borrowing
Against the future.
cash flows. Okay, and as we talked about, you have debt service. on that
Right.
also.
No, again, I'm not, yeah. Sarah, is your hand still up or I see Juan's?
Yes,
Mayor, go ahead, Commissioner Malika, you go first.
so my question, and I'm listening to everything you're saying, Bruce. So the funding that's coming down for the infrastructure could take care of some of these potential needs that somebody somewhere has earmarked in the sales tax. We don't know when and where, right? I guess I'm sorry.
I don't know if it's a fait accompli that you're gonna get the money to offset that from the infrastructure bill, the federal infrastructure bill.
Okay, and then we spent roughly $2.4 million on the properties for acquisition for a surface parking lot that has not been done yet. So if the CRA moves forward and does a project, that we are going to get those funds back, correct?
Right.
No, wait. I'm glad you brought, that's why my hand was up, Madam Mayor, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
It's not, remember, the money comes back if a development provides public parking as part of that development project.
Mhm.
Or if we put a parking lot there.
Correct. And that's why my hand was up, that, and I'm glad you pointed that out, Commissioner Malika. Yes, there's money committed, literally, but to your point, there's 2.4, you can almost carve out, with some what ifs.
Right.
But let's just be clear when we put something out there,
But if that's coming from the CRA, if that 2.4 is coming from the CRA.
No,
why-
that's 2.4 that we've already spent out of penny sales tax that we gave to I shouldn't say we, that the previous commission city manager gave to the CRA to acquire the properties to move forward with the project that now we have,
You know, the
said-
LMK Street and all that.
yes,
Yeah,
LMKJ,
right.
every alphabet.
Right.
So that money has already been spent out of the penny sales tax. However, if we fulfill that parking need, if we move forward
We
with
get
the
it back.
project, we get that funds back, we being the city, not the
Right.
CRA, correct, Juan?
if public parking is not created there, the money has to be paid back to the sales tax pot. Okay, let me be very clear. If public parking is not created on those properties, that money has to be paid back to the pot.
Right, so not only have we spent the money, we'll never get it back. So now we're actually going in the hole.
Well, remember, going back to a time before you, okay, at that time, what was being looked at and what was committed was in a development project that public parking would be part of that development project.
Mhm.
Okay, so,
Right.
But it sounds like Commissioner Malika's interpretation is perhaps realistic, that if that project, whatever it is.
We don't get the money back.
Goes forward without the public parking, and I assume it's some number of parking spaces or something. And if it comes in less than that, maybe we get part of it, or maybe we get none of it, I don't know, but it sounds like something you can't really rely on receiving.
we could essentially be looking at a 2.456 debt because we would be non-compliant on the use of that based on the surtax referendum language. So remember, we're compliant because we submit these reports to the review committee, and for the purpose of public parking, that's an eligible expense. But looking long-term, if that money was expended for a different use that doesn't meet the letter of the referendum, now we're looking at, okay, now we have to, there you go.
When do we have to solidify that, Juan? What is the date for that? Do you know?
Well, because of the surtax is exceeding the projections, which is what Bruce talked about, which is why we got the additional 1.6. Remember, it was a 10-year program, and the county had an article out in the Palm Beach Post, I think 2 weeks ago, and they're now, because of the additional revenues, are looking to kind of reset their deck. And there were some mentionings of potentially meeting those revenue numbers prior to the 10 years getting here. Now, I don't know yet if that means we're not going to go the full 10 years because the county got the projected half-cent sales tax revenue goal, so it sunsets earlier, or if it runs all the way to 10 years. I'm still trying to get a clear answer from the county on what exactly does that mean, because revenues, to everyone's surprise, during the pandemic accelerated versus what we were projecting, and coming in a little bit lower.
And just one follow-up clarify so we understand the pot. If the county were to, and I think this is for Bruce probably, but maybe for one too. If the county were to say, hey, the stuff's coming in faster than we expected, we're gonna shut this thing down, not at 10 years, but at 9.2 years, whatever. So a smaller number of units. What would that do to that 1.7 projected? Would they cut it off at the original projection and say, we got to that, that's good enough, we're stopping?
No, the projections,
Would hold, do you think? I mean, it's an estimate.
it's an estimate, everything done with, up to the point would be an estimate. The impact would be, if you go back, it would reduce that additional
Last year.
that last year bump.
So we're pretty safe probably on that number,
I
even if they pull out early.
I feel good with the one that
Okay.
we want to get the dividend at the end.
Okay, and as promised, we're gonna take a 10-minute break now so that Commissioner Stokes can come here. Commissioner Stokes, you ready to come?
Might be on the way.
She might be on the way. Okay, 10-minute break. More coffee.
Okay, let me close this. Ladies, it's after 5. Madam Mayor, it's 5:19 and we are live again. Can hear you. Can you?
Not on lawyers. Okay, so where were we? And welcome now, let the record reflect that Commissioner Stokes is with us and Commissioner Maliga is still on Zoom.
Correct.
So where are we now? Where, since last we spoke?
I think this dialogue has provided some insight and input relative to different thoughts. Been working out some strategies, listening to it, as I said. Let me do this. Let me go back. You know what the moving parts are. I hope that that information is understood and identified. But with that, I can go back and take, for example, take a look at fund balances, see what potential is to appropriate some fund balances, take a look at, doing a small debt issuance. Different
Partial for a partial.
Right, different ideas to get the commissioners to the $6 million.
Okay.
And put that for more consideration. And then expand that conversation.
Yeah.
But right now, I think we're just.
Well, all right, and I just said what I was talking up at the bench earlier was, when we all got elected last March, then we had to, we always wait for the new city manager to come. So this is a conversation we probably should have had, a few months ago, because now you're saying you're Mr. Reality. Okay, thank you very much. Spoil my little dreams. But I do think that it's important to have this conversation prior to, and I think all of us, expected to talk about where to put the palm trees tonight, how deep should the water be? But I think that it would be irresponsible for us to go forward if we didn't have a bet. And, it's coming later than we wanted because the time has gone by. But I don't think it's responsible for us. I mean, I know what I want. I think we all pretty much agree we want this great pool for kids, the whole list. But if we have a responsibility to be fiscally responsible. So that sounds like a plan. Commissioner Stokes has her light on.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I missed anything, but the $6 million was a number that was floated around
Right.
for a long time. So I'm just curious if we're trying to find a way to get to that number, because that's the number that everybody's used to, or it seems like an arbitrary number to me. And a lot of the projects that were proposed years ago were more than $6 million. And, I'm just wondering, like, with all the pieces, how, trying to get to $6 million first is the right move, or should we, I want us to get the best pool we can with the money we have, obviously. And we're just picking $6 million because that's what we're used to?
Do it this way. I think the $6 million was predicated, and you probably know better than I, Commissioner, on some baseline threshold of what was needed at the pool. But what I can do is I can come back as part of that analysis and say, this will give you, it'll buy you that much. And I can go, I can go over $6 million because I can
Shake the tree at varying degrees, exactly when it comes out.
And this is what the impact would be if we did that. So I can't tell you how much more than 6 million
Right.
I can get it, but I can go through those different buckets and try to come up with a strategy that makes sense.
Okay, and I'm also wondering, at what point do we consult a pool management company or somebody that can actually give us the realistic part of the piece of what will it look like, how much will it cost, and how much will we bring in once it's built? I feel like that's also, we need to make sure that we're not like you said, I did hear that part about over designing it. in building like too large of a house. So if we only realistically are gonna get X number of bathers, I guess they call them, swimming pools, right?
We could get one of those
Swimmers,
really big
But we
above
don't-
ground pools.
You know, one that's gonna fit.
And every
twice.
year we buy a new one.
But we want to make sure that the initial cost and the maintenance costs, we're not overbuilding for what is real. So we have I think, McCallum's report that gives us like an idea of what potential, activities and sources of income are there, but I'm just curious when that piece of reality enters into the conversation.
And I'm glad you mentioned
Let me, Madam Mayor, if I may,
that.
Sure.
and not to cut you off, Bruce, but there was a couple questions in there that Commissioner Stokes posed. And I think at this juncture, it's extremely important for everyone, the public listening, to understand how the $6 million came to be. All right. And it's as simple as this. When we first got the sales tax money, there was a projection that was done on future revenue earnings based on market. And at the time, an employee who's no longer here gave us a projection of about $22 million over a 10-year period. That was a conservative approach. And then the commission at the time started to appropriate dollars toward projects as they came forward. At the same time, there was talks about how can we not wait to receive all the money and borrow, hedge against those future revenues. And at the time, we were told by staff, and the commission was told by staff, that we could probably borrow up to 80% of the all-in number, 22 million. So we landed somewhere around the $16 million figure. And at the time, we had appropriated about $10 million in projects. So 16 from 10, we ended up with 6. Now, back in 2015-16, Miami Springs built an aquatic center that at the time had a lot of elements that were very similar to what the commission at the time wanted to see at the beach. And they paid $5 million and change back in, mid 2015-16. Don't hold me to the date, but around that time frame. So
Miami Lakes.
Was it on the beach though?
no, it wasn't. It was not. No. So, and I think I've floated around pictures. I may have even shared with some of you and before. It had cabanas, and whatnot. So we needed at that time, that elected body needed a starting point to talk about this concept, this project. And then at the time, we were looking at sales tax as a means to fund that, right? We never explored any revenue bonds. It was just, let's just get the conversation going. So the $6 million literally, and I joke about this, back of the napkin, but it was just done for math. So to your point, Commissioner Stokes, we never arrived at it because it was driven by design. We didn't arrive at it because it was driven by a bunch of research that came forward and said, okay, it's $6 million. It was literally pulling some pieces together and off we went. Okay. Now the truest, most process that we've gone through was when we engaged Chris Zimmerman. And again, we went through a process and selected CPZ. When we selected CPZ put together a team of firms, including ACE, which is one of the top industry leaders in pool management, pool operations. So they were part of that whole design team. And there's information as part of, going back, where there was a loose pro forma, based on, again, some conceptual designs that we went through, through the charrette process. So and reason why I'm bringing this up is to caution us to not make the mistake of designing to a number. Okay. At some point, sounds like if you decide to, as a body, to engage CPZ and we've talked about this, a third design that has elements that you guys all agree upon, then Chris can help guide us and give you, based on today's market, which is, one can argue 20 to 30% more than prior, what are we looking at in probable cost estimates before we move forward and create construction documents? Now, if you recall, we almost got to that point before the pandemic when we narrowed it down to 2 designs. Both of those designs came in over $6 million. right when the pandemic happened, our next conversation was going to be, do we issue this out and create construction documents, understanding that, the $6 million that we could potentially borrow against, remember, if you think back to when we were trying to borrow that money, or do we simplify and start value engineering out these concepts? And that never was able to happen because COVID hit at the same time. So I almost want everybody just to stop thinking about the $6 million, because there isn't $6 million as you saw tonight. Okay. Now we could create a financial stack, or means, on how to fund a capital project that's from 6 million to, you could say, don't bring anything back that's more than 10 million or whatever that number might be. But we just kind of need to clear the air, clear the deck on the 6 million and how it was born.
Well, but that did raise the expectation in pretty much everyone that there was this magical $6 million stuck away. It was, it was not sitting in a pot in a bank, but it was coming to us. So I think that it's not unreasonable for us to think, hey, what happened to the $6 million? And I know Herman probably has something to say because his light's on.
Well, it's disappointing that we're not talking about the future when we knew that the cost of $6 million is going to be more than $6 million. It's going to demonstrate that Lake Worth whipsaws back and forth politically, not just financially, because now we could talk about ARPA funds. And I'm not completely clear that out of the money from the sales tax is a bottom line number. And the state was going to collect it either to that amount or stop collecting it before a date, because they've already collected that amount. And we were going to get the same amount, whether it was in 10 years or 5. Is that correct? So
I don't want to answer that right now because I was not here when that legislation was.
well, that's what we're working with. So I think we should know that there's a true bottom line figure from the sales tax,
Right.
which isn't the only pot of money that we can talk about.
If I understood Mark correctly, and I have the same understanding, we had not definitively answered that question. He's still working on that.
Okay, then, you're telling us that we don't have $6 million, but you can't tell us definitively that we can't talk about spending $6 million because, the community wants us to talk about spending $6 million or more. But now we're talking about, we only have 3 million to spend. But we need to know that there's a bottom line to the sales tax, and if we've spent it all somewhere else, then we need to know that. But I don't believe we have, and I don't think anybody else on the dais is going to tell me that we've spent or committed and fully legally committed $22 million or whatever the collection bottom line was.
I don't think that's what he's saying. I think that he's saying that we've said, this is a good idea, this is a good idea. Not we, predecessors, which melded into that, which invaded that $6 million, which we could look at what those commitments are and noodle with them perhaps, which is going to be its own challenge because we need all the things on these lists. But I do think like with infrastructure, like we have all that road maintenance money, I think that's almost a realistic place to actually get some federal dollars for the infrastructure. So, I mean, hopefully and that's quite a bit of money. Street maintenance is $1 million and
It's $1 million a year.
yeah. So, but some of it is, I mean, some of what we need to do is
2 million to recreation.
to pay, really improve some of our roads. That's clearly a need.
And I'm looking at 2 million committed to recreation, and the pool isn't mentioned in recreation, interestingly enough.
Where's recreation? What page?
21.
Oh,
Is that for future stuff?
yeah,
Yeah,
it's back up.
yeah.
On that, I deliberately took $6 million off because we're talking about 6 million. Okay, and that's the various projects that we're talking about, so I didn't want to double count.
So bottom line, we have committed $17 million out of the penny sales tax.
17 million is the capital number. Is that what you're referencing?
That's, because, you know, we're talking about paper money, the budget money versus actual money that we're going to be receiving from the penny sales tax.
Okay, what I would recommend is looking at page 8 again, where it goes through all the different classifications, if you will, and earmarks. We originally estimated $21 million ago. We have spent, appropriated, $7.2 million. That brings us down to $13.7 million of available funds. Okay, from that, we did a borrowing against future revenues. Okay, that equals $6.2 million.
Well, can we touch any of that, or that's also been committed?
That's all committed. That's,
That's beyond, right,
That's gone,
yeah.
okay. I am trying, just as a footnote, I'm trying to preserve as much of that 6.2 million outside of the, not using the CI, I mean, paying sales tax, repaid debt service to add back, but I won't know that until the end of the year as everything flows through. But if I don't need to use the penny sales tax to pay that debt service, I'll preserve that to increase your balance in that penny sales tax capital.
the end of 21, you're talking?
Every year, we're in 22 right now.
Okay,
Okay.
but
So-
it almost sounded like we have to wait a year to hear the answer.
Yeah, because if I don't, if, for example, if the general fund has sufficient revenues that it doesn't need to dip into the penny sales tax
Uh-huh.
fund
To pay the interest.
to pay
Right.
the interest, I won't touch that,
Uh-huh.
because then it will give you more money in the penny sales tax. And it will not hurt the general fund.
Mhm.
Okay, so, but I won't know until the end of the fiscal year, when the year is closed, how much latitude and flexibility, if I have increased revenues or decreased expenditures,
Bless you.
I will have that flexibility.
Do you have any idea like how we did in 2021? Is it true?
We didn't have the debt service.
We do
Fiscal year 22 is the first year that we had
Okay, we haven't started.
debt service for the
penny sales tax.
penny sales.
So
Excellent.
that's 6.2 that we borrowed.
Right.
So if I don't need to use it, I'll preserve it,
Mhm.
which will help out in this conversation.
But in the meantime, we want to kind of get going with something, so I don't really,
All this is, I hate to say it this way,
but you would.
everything that we're talking about here, and to the chagrin of Commissioner Robinson, it's in flux. All right, because
Everything's in flux because we haven't even talked about what we're going to do at the pool or at Oceanfront Park.
We can't talk about it until we find out how it's going to get funded.
Madam Mayor, I've had my hand up. I keep waving and Shayla keeps laughing at me.
You're in a tiny little box, so yes, please, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to interrupt. I'm over
No,
here
no,
like
no.
waving and I don't know how to move my little hand over from the corner so you can see it. But anyway, I'm here.
That's the advantage of being in person. You get
Um,
hurt.
it- I
Go ahead.
can, yes. So
I
I
know,
have,
I know.
I have an idea. So I'm hearing what everybody's saying. And I would love for finance to come back and retweak their numbers, look at what they can do. In the meantime, I think that we should finalize what we'd want to see in the design, what we want to see in the project, figure out how much it's going to cost, and the process that Bruce is doing what he's doing, then come back and have a meeting of the minds and Bruce say, okay, you've got 3.7 million. And we're like, okay, this pool is going to cost 8.4 million. We need to find $5 million. Great. Let's go to the county. Let's ask them for match money. Then start putting the plan in process. I feel like finance needs to do more work. And I feel like we as a body need to focus on what that structure is going to look like, what that pool is going to look like, and put the design to paper and then come back together and say, okay, we want this. We're here. How do we fill this gap?
And as Juan said earlier, some value engineering can come into play with that as well.
Right,
So
and let's
can-
not design
I
a
would-
$20 million plan.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to, but I would love for us to say, okay, Kim wants this, Herman wants this, let's all agree on a design. And see, like you said, Kim, get somebody in here and say, okay, this is what's gonna cost, here's what's gonna cost to run. And then we go, all right, here's the business plan, here's the actual structural plan, how do we make them marry?
Can we talk about a public-private partnership?
Correct, but we need to pick a design and have finance go back to the drawing board.
Based on the whipsawing of our politics in Lake Worth, I don't know any developer that would want to work with Lake Worth doing anything.
But why would you say that, Herman? That's not fair. We're a new board. This new commission, and I'm going to speak on my behalf, has been moving the needle forward faster than has been done in years. And I don't think that that's a fair comment to this board that has been on the train of let's get the pool done. We're not going back and forth. It's okay. Let's make a design. Let's pick a design tonight and move forward.
Because if we choose a public-private partnership, we should allow the partner, not the public, to design a pool. And we haven't gotten to that point yet, and I don't think we ever will.
I thought that we were here tonight to finalize that.
I'm basing that comment on other developments, other situations with working with the city.
Well, that's the past.
And
Good.
I hear you, Commissioner Robinson, that, and I think what we're dealing with, there are two philosophies of how to move forward. We have a challenge that we don't have the money in hand. Commissioner Malega is suggesting, let's figure out pretty close to what we would like. It's going to probably be on the wish list, and Commissioner Stokes says, don't hit 20 million, that's kind of a problem. So let's keep it down quite a bit lower than that. Bruce is saying, I'll go shake the trees, but remember, as I shake the trees, something is going to fall off of something else. So don't get your hopes too high that there's free money that I haven't found yet. So that gives us some bounds there. I think Commissioner Robinson, you're saying, forget all that. Let's go outside, let somebody else finance it, let them design it, and hope that we get what we want. And I think there philosophically is kind of a feeling up here on the commission that actually we'd rather design, not down to the nails, but pretty close to what we want, and then find a way to pay for it, rather than the other approach, which is let somebody else design it however they want. And knowing that a public-private partnership rarely comes for free. It will have.
How much more are we going to give CPC to, again, come back?
I didn't hear the beginning.
How much more, I'm interested in how much expenditures we're going to do before we make a decision.
For them to come back with something realistic. I mean, with all due respect, why was CPZ designing $20 million pools at our oceanfront? We never, ever were gonna come up with that kind of money. So I'm sorry that we went down this long road with them before, but it never seemed like a realistic road to me.
I don't know how much more we're going to spend to make a
Madam
decision.
Mayor, if I may,
Yeah,
I just
yes.
I appreciate the passion. I think this is the 18th workshop I've had on the beach. Remember, all right, Chris, CPZ went through two different types of designs. They went through the initial charrette that was give us all your best inputs, your dreams, and then they were tasked with trying to bring those to reality with no boundaries. Okay. And then from that conversation, it was whittled down to, okay, go back and simplify something that's a little bit more in tune at the time with reality of what the commission at the time was willing to consider. So therefore, you didn't see hotels or any big giant water parks.
Right.
But we have to recognize that back then, during that time, the idea of a public-private partnership as a potential vehicle to fund a project was a real consideration. We went to the extent of hiring.
Look,
if we're gonna
get anything done with these fucking name dogs.
Well,
Excuse me?
Commissioner Malega?
You might want to mute yourself.
all right. So, at the time, Madam Mayor, and everyone, at the time, a public-private partnership was a real, it was on the table, okay?
Okay.
And we went to the extent, and we did a presentation really in the very beginning when you first came to office, when we hired WGI and Mr. Gilmore, right? And if you remember, he did a quick, triple P presentation on really what it was. Because even back then, even though the $6 million kind of, target was out there, there was still the realization that it was going to be difficult to fund a beach improvement, okay, and come in at $6 million, just looking at, cost of construction, pilings, east of the East Coast construction line on the ocean. So we were looking at every possible financing vehicle to do that. So the $20 million concepts, we had removed ourselves as a city from that kind of being in our reality at the time. It was really narrowed down to do those two designs. And then again, I've brought this up multiple times, and then COVID hit us. And I'm, we've been trying to kind of get back to where we were, on that base, almost like second base, which the next step was going to be, okay, those two designs are probably outside of our scope of what we can financially commit to. Maybe there's a value engineering piece that never happened because then we left, COVID happened. So I just want to make sure that we're careful with what we're saying, because it's always been a very sensitive conversation in the community, and what we say and the words matter. So we got to be very clear on what's happened in the past, because it matters, because it's kind of why we're here today.
Okay, now the two A and B from the CPZ were like in the $9 million range, correct?
Correct.
I don't know where 20 million is.
The range that came back from the original designs were like
Oh.
10 to $20 million.
Right, but the ones that were,
Right, there was never like, what could we do with $5 million? Like, it was never even considered.
okay, but the
So,
ones that we have in this book are both around 9.
yeah,
Right.
but at the time,
And
that
we're,
was the lowest of all the designs. that
right,
we-
but I think what Juan is also saying is that the process of value engineering, which is looking at what can we give to get
Right.
down to our price, never happened.
So that's why it's like, when we hear the frustration of, we have already done this with CPZ, they've already given us all this work.
Mhm.
And it's like, but we didn't get all the work we needed because we didn't get an actual value engineered, if that's what you want to call it, design, or something that we could afford.
To bring it down to
We
6
never
million,
got
5
there.
million.
We don't have that. It all started off very high. We need to bring it back to down. So I understand Commissioner Robinson's frustration, but we never got
Mhm.
to a place
Mhm.
that was
It
ever.
all just got dropped.
Yeah,
Um,
and it could have been because of COVID or whatever. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, yeah.
What do we do now?
What do we do now?
Now,
Um,
Madam Mayor, I want to remind everybody, I do have Chris, and he's on, he's been listening. And Chris can probably help you guys understand even more, and he can reiterate what I was saying. Like, we got to a certain point in a big process. There was still a lot of work left to do, including that value engineering out. Before you ever get to construction documents, we were very far away from construction documents, honestly. We
Yeah.
needed to refine those last two designs, and it's truly where we're kind of at. And
Okay, but with the money that we paid CPZ did not include that next step?
no, CPZ completed their task order. So the next step to get to construction docs would have been an issuance of another task order, which could have included at the time a third design, something more, simpler. And then from there, because before you get to construction docs, we have to agree on what we want to have bidded out.
Right,
There's no guessing game with construction docs.
right, I think we know
Already
that.
picked countertops, you picked diving boards and everything. So we have a long road ahead of us, and that's just, it is what it is. Chris, thank you for joining. Anything you want to add? Thanks for being patient.
No problem, Juan. Thank you. I think you summed it up. We started this process with an open book, just whatever we wanted to dream for this site. Everything from a basic no pool grass area to the PPP. Our very first round, we were geared to think outside the box. And we came up with like 5 different designs, ranging from very, very basic to the PPP design. But we were also charged with solving some other problems on this site, such as a way and a monumental stair and some way to get from the parking up to the pool. We were charged with looking at the trash area and what we were going to do there. We were charged with adding more parking and doing it in different phases, including parking decks to double the parking. So there were a lot of items that we were asked to do by the city and per previous commissions to really step outside the box. So when we did that, naturally the prices were high and affordability was an issue. So then we were tasked with, let's go back and come up with what you saw as A and B. And those 2 designs were based on the wish list of those things that we were told we needed to have.
All right.
So now, knowing what it is and knowing where those costs are, now the decision has to be, if they're $10 million and you don't have $10 million, then we have a great menu to start with right now. We broke everything down from what the lifeguard building was versus the pool. It was broken down into very, very specific items that kind of like a menu, so to speak. What do you want off this menu? Now understand that was all prior to COVID. And right now, just keep in mind, prices and availability of materials and construction costs have gone up tremendously over the last 2 years. Right now it's very, very hard for contractors to bid. So, like I said, Juan, you kind of summarized it, but that's what we went through.
Well, hopefully by the time we get to build anything, that crisis will be over and we'll have all the concrete.
Let's hope so.
Okay, so Mr. Zimmerman, what I'm hearing perhaps is, or I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, that would it be fruitful for us to have one more meeting with your group, with us, because we have a list, we had a workshop a while back about what we want, and it's, a lot of them really matches what the A and B look like.
Right, but we do have to trim that down.
No, I know, right. But a lot of this is basic stuff like water in the pool, no.
I was gonna say that. You stole my-
Madam Mayor, can I jump in? I think,
Well,
go ahead,
okay.
Madam.
Well, I was just gonna say, the things that we talked about that we condensed down to this list is pretty much, we want shade, a nice deck, food availability, a no solid wall so you can see it from the street. We're not talking about high-end, we didn't have a lot of big wish lists. We're simple people. So I think that the elements of what we're looking for, sort of contained on this list in terms of our wish list, can be somehow incorporated in the design. We've got a really good start. And I think that the list that we all talked about pretty much fits in with Plan A, B from CPC.
Madam Mayor?
Yeah.
Question?
Sure.
Is it possible for the design that has already been completed be revised?
I think that's what we're talking about.
Or modified?
I think, if I'm wrong, I think that's what we're talking about. Yeah. We're not start. Who was at the charrette? Who in this room was at the charrettes? Right? There's a few of us that are the old timers that spent a weekend. So I don't want to hear there's no public input. So yeah, I think we work from here. So finance is going to shake the trees and figure a few things out. two, we're gonna look for alternative funding. That's sort of part of that.
And I think we agreed that the alternative funding list should be as imaginative and as long. as
Creative,
possible.
right, right. Mr. Gates, give us some money.
Why not?
Why not?
You're not asking.
Got plenty.
Well, and it should include a PPP.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a
From
possibility.
what we've been told though, if we're designing our own pool, it doesn't really lend itself
To a PPP.
to a PPP.
So us, Ron Art, that's another, I'm just trying to distill things down. That would be finance. Get us, try to find some more money. We finance and the city staff looking for alternate funding. And then I don't know, do we meet with CPZ again and say, here's our list of wants and how does it fit into your design? Or do we, what do you, and I'm looking for you guys. I don't want to be the.
Madam Mayor, if I may,
Yep,
I brought this up at a prior workshop. I think what would advance the conversation is to get consensus from the group tonight to ask Mr. Zimmerman to create a proposal to walk us through a refinement of the existing two concepts, i.e. modify, right? And then when he provides a proposal, I can bring that back to the commission at a regular commission meeting. And, we can vote on appropriating dollars to go through that process. Now that process and that task order could include up to individual one-on-one meetings with each of you, because you don't have the advantage as
that's
an elected official to go through what the other elected officials went through. Not only was there a public charrette, but Chris spent individual one-on-one time with each of the elected officials and staff over months. Okay. So, giving Chris some clarity and some specificity to create a proposal that I can bring back to you guys would be the most logical next step and where we were in the process.
I see, Commissioner, thank you. My one question, Sarah, I'm not ignoring you. My one question would be, how much would Mr. Zimmerman charge us to do that? And now I'm because we're such a wonderful city and we're so poor. Commissioner Maliga, what were you gonna say?
So my level of frustration is rising, and I'm sure that everybody else might be getting messages like I am about, we just can't make a decision on this. How does anybody feel about scheme A? Because scheme A seems to tick off 98% of what we have on this wish list that you sent us, Mayor. And I mean, besides the actual flow and the design and the squareness of it, everything that's in that scheme A, to me, ticks off what we're looking for, except I don't see the splash pad. So that would be something we'd have to talk about.
Right.
Has anybody compared the two?
The A and B?
Yeah, so scheme A compared to the list that we have is what I did.
Right.
And the design looks good to me. Again, I'm not really anal about the design. I don't see this. I see a splash pad with an arrow, but I don't know if that could be moved outside because we wanted people to have access to that.
Right.
But maybe we could at least start with scheme A because we've already been there.
Mhm.
What is anybody's thoughts on that?
Yeah, and
That's what we're talking about.
yeah, I think that's what we were actually discussing.
But did we say A or B?
I think
sorry.
I think we've been referring, I think there's a general reference to A is my understanding.
Right, but I do if we're going to, we know we can't afford scheme A, we know it needs some work, so I would like to go through. I understand if people are impatient, but we've waited for this for so long and we need to take the time and do it right. And we need to have fruitful conversations. And I think this is one because we are seeing a next step that could really help lead us to where we want to be. So I personally like the idea of hearing from Chris, what he recommends as far as helping us value engineer this and get this in the more affordable range. And I am certainly super excited to meet one-on-one or and then again, if need be, but I think that's a great next step is to take the next step. This was never going to be enough.
When you look at this, the staff and meeting room, we really don't necessarily need a staff, talk about your value engineering, right? So, okay, then Mr. Zimmerman, talk to us. Well, what would you see we need to do?
So we've
Oh, I'm
narrowed
sorry,
the
Mr.
conversation down to, we're building a pool and that's it.
And then we can do something else. Can we get through this and then talk about the
Yeah.
upstairs and how we want to handle that?
Well, are we going to or not? You know, that's, you know, now we're talking about, you know, this conversation about development exemplifies that we shouldn't be developing anything.
I don't know what to say, Herman, about that. I don't really know what that means. So, Kim, I think you're right on the right track. You know, as you know, Mr. Zimmerman, we are short of funds and long on enthusiasm. And I guess, you know, we would ask from you, if I may, Madam City Manager, you know, what do you see, what sort of efficient plan could we come up to be able to have you come back in, look at our wish list, noodle with the design, you know, maybe meet with one-on-one with us. Time frame, what would that be? And cost, what would that be? And that's not a pop quiz. I mean, you can come back to us with that.
Yeah, I'd like to come back with you on the actual fee because I'd like to kind of get a little thought process in my own mind of what I would recommend and put it in a proposal form that's actually written and give you some scope. But just as a general idea, if I had my way, I'd sit down over a big table with a lot of markers and sketch pad and meet with you all at once. But you know,
which we did at the charrette for 2 days.
However, it is a public meeting and I understand the issues with
We
that.
could do it. We could do that.
So,
I think that's a good.
We could totally do that.
you know,
I think that's fabulous. Let's do it.
you know, it's going to be, maybe it's a day-long meeting, maybe it's a half a day, you know, and we actually just have a focused attention span that this is what we're going to do.
That would be a wonderful
Yeah.
thing.
I support that idea.
I think Commissioners Maliga is shaking her head yes.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna hope he considers his previous check in the future billing.
Sounds like blackmail, Herman.
We've thrown ourselves upon the mercy of the kind Mr. Zimmerman.
Well, the nice thing is, and just understand this, we have all the background information.
Right, exactly.
Even our cost estimators, we're going to use the same cost estimators that have been really successful on other projects for us. They've got all the background, all the computer input and everything they've had so far. So that does give them a leg up and it should help, you know, financially to you and our fees to be able to draw on that experience and bring it back.
But we're deciding now that we're going over to your house and we're not going to visit the neighborhood. I mean, we're not going to consider an ITN. We're not going to consider a public-private partnership. I mean, let's cut to the wasting.
I think, Commissioner Robbins, that is a pretty good assessment of the general feeling of the commission, but.
And we'll get less and pay more. And the citizens will have to pay more because we haven't considered the possibilities of income and development on our oceanfront park.
I am not against a PPP, Commissioner Robinson. So, I mean, that's not something.
Works.
I'm sorry?
I said, if that's what works.
Yeah, I mean, that's what comes down to the dollars and cents. Yeah, I mean, we have to be fiscally responsible. So no, I'm not against a PPP. And I would love to have this sit down with Mr. Zimmerman as soon as possible, if whatever we can put on our calendar. I would even do it on a Saturday.
Exactly. Our city manager has her light on.
I don't say Madam President.
I like that. I like that. Your
Look,
Majesty also
we
works.
do a Saturday as well. So whatever works for you, an evening, a Saturday, you know.
Okay. So do we want to try to schedule that now? What were you going to say? I'm sorry.
I almost forgot now.
Oh,
COVID.
yeah.
Mine.
It's the COVID. That's right.
What I wanted to say was, you know, I know this has been a very robust discussion, and I feel encouraged about what we came to talk about has accomplished something.
Mhm.
One of the things that we did, we laid out where we are financially. And so we felt that that was a huge piece in making a decision as to the direction we go as far as how this is financed, how should we finance based on our financial position. So I think we have some realities of where we are there. And we have, of course, more to do in being creative based on the discussions today. So this was very helpful for us, the team.
Right.
Very helpful.
This is our first
Yes.
meeting as a team.
Yes, and
Go forward,
particularly
right.
going and digging deep
Right.
into the financial portion of this. So that's very encouraging. The other part is that we're now getting into the design piece.
Mhm.
And we have Mr. Zimmerman who has graciously given us a great recommendation that he would like to sit down and go through a whole day exercise as far as modifying the existing designs according to our wants as of today. So I think we always wanted to go toward that piece. And then the next part of it is, as we talk about the RFP, the ITN, or any other PPP, whatever tools and avenues we want to flow to finance and bring this project to fruition, certainly will benefit from all these pieces that we're speaking of, the financial pieces and also the potential design of it. So we'll know that direction to go in to develop the project. So I think we've made a huge progress here today. And I think, I hope I can speak on behalf of staff that I think we feel more comfortable and have a greater direction and know how to move forward. We will certainly work closely with Mr. Zimmerman to get a proposal from him so that we can schedule as soon as we can schedule. I think the input with him to go through the exercise and designing the pool will help. And then once we have that piece, because that's always been the huge portion of rebuilding the beach complex, what we're going to do with the pool.
Mhm.
And then, and I hear Commissioner Robinson, Vice Mayor Robinson talk about, okay, what about the full complex? And I think once we have that piece settled about what we want in the pool, we can then,
Take it. from there.
take the time and talk about the full complex. Because I think we can't get over that hurdle until we know what we're doing with the big elephant in the room,
Right.
and that's the pool.
That is.
Right. So I just felt.
Yeah, no, thank you. I also feel, I mean, these are conversations that just due to circumstances we didn't have 6 months ago because we just weren't there yet. So Commissioner McVoy.
Thank you. I too, I think I share the city managers and maybe almost all of our enthusiasm and feeling that, yes, we are moving forward. It might not seem like we're gonna compete with Mr. Bolt, I think was his name. who ran
You see-
the thing.
Zane.
But I think we are moving forward. One thought to help with that, before we did the half-day, all-day meeting with Mr. Zimmerman, would it be helpful? I found, for context, I found your list, Madam Mayor, very helpful as, okay, these are things, and then I think we could each go through and do the check.
Define it a little bit, yeah.
Are we on board with that? I think there might be a few where we could expand some of them out, like it says nice deck. Well,
Right.
there's
exactly.
another one that says icky deck, and I didn't check
Icky
the
deck.
icky deck one. No, I
Icky-
didn't.
Oh,
My point is,
Oh.
that's my humor.
oh,
My
I'm learning.
My point is that nice deck might be something that we might want to flesh out a little bit more and say, well, what about this? What about that?
exactly.
And that I don't know what the mechanism is, but we might expand this list a little bit. And if there's some way, send it to everybody of the commission and people check off and send it back to the city manager.
And,
I like
and,
that.
and define, narrow these down. finesse
Narrow
a
it
little bit.
down so that we're a little bit further along by the time we get to Mr. Zimmerman.
Yeah.
And it might be, some of it might be looking at the plan and then I forget what the elements are, but like you said, the meeting room.
Right.
Well, and that might be, there needs to be a place to check from staff that, dudes, you really need that meeting room and here's why. And we might not know that.
Right.
We might agree, we might not agree, but some way of going through the elements to narrow it down a little bit of what are the things, and some of it might be kind of flavor stuff,
Mhm.
which is a little harder to.
I mean, for example, when I look at Plan A, Scheme A, the public restroom up in the north, yeah, it says public restroom up in the north. Okay, to me, when I look at that, and again, I see, okay, that could be, because one of the things we've all agreed on is there needs to be an affordable food source up there. If you go to the beach, you can get a hot dog or a hamburger, fries, and walk up to the window. That could be one side accessible from people inside the pool, but it could also be outside accessible for people that just want to go to the beach, like we used to have the John G's walk-up
The
window.
window.
Yes, I mean, that's just a little adjustment to it that I think would serve a
And,
better
and
purpose.
maybe we have sort of, along with the list, you have an other category down at the bottom where people could write in, we could write in exactly that. Hey, what about putting that? so
Well, that would
it has
come in
dual
our-
access.
Our meetings beforehand as a suggestion, because that's one thing I think makes somehow.
Yeah.
to
And I'm
let
sure
people-
we all have, can write some things down.
Oh, I'm sure we can. We are very creative.
You need adults, I'm sure.
No
I have a
short.
question. How does anybody else feel about making, seeing if we can financially afford the lazy river aspect?
It's so they're really huge. They're really huge and the upkeep is really, I mean, it's a lovely idea. I love them when I go to a big hotel, but they're huge. It's a lot of,
Footprint's an issue,
Yeah.
and energy to run them is so much an issue, but footprint, that seems.
Can we hear from the public?
we're gonna,
Um,
Commissioner Stokes.
The last thing I just want to emphasize again is I am really excited to do this planning of what's important and what we can value engineer out, but we have to be paying attention to what we think we're marketing this pool as. So I'm not saying this is it, but for example, if we were going to try, if part of our business plan was that we were going to rent the space out for parties, like when I have my children's party somewhere, there is a meeting room that they can go in and eat their
Right,
pizza and
right,
do
right,
things
yeah.
like that. So how much is that meeting room cost us versus how much
Mhm.
revenue will we lose if we can't have children's parties or whatever
Right.
there? And we need to check on, if we're saying we're having children's parties, but we're also saying that that same hot time of the week, that we're also doing this other thing, are they competing? So I'm having a hard time myself consolidating, making sure that we're only paying for stuff that we're actually going to use, and that's going to be part of our business plan.
Right.
And that we have a viable business plan. So I'm just not sure when the programming aspect comes into it, because you might just say, well, that's not part of what we're gonna do.
Mhm.
But like, when and how do we make those decisions? Because we have to count for them in the design or take them out.
Okay, Commissioner McVoy.
To respond slightly to that, my sort of design philosophy would be design flexibility in as much as possible and leave some of the choices for later, as long as it's not exorbitantly expensive.
If there's space for the meeting room and we can't do it right now, we keep the space and we do it.
Something, in that line, try not to box ourselves in too much,
Okay.
but leave operation.
Well, it sounds like these are the
Everything
common,
they want.
I'm sorry?
The lifeguards aren't gonna get everything they want.
Oh, nobody's. gonna
Nobody
do
is.
everything they
I said
want.
nobody is.
Yeah, there was a lot of design for
Um,
lifeguards in this.
Well, there's a lifeguard building. So we have public comment. It's 10 after 6. We've been at this for a couple hours now. Do you have any last last word?
Mr. Miller, sit down.
Before you go
Madam-
down all.
Madam Mayor, I got something I need to show really quick as well.
All right, so we're gonna give Mr. Miller the opportunity to say his last words first. Your last words. I know it does sound,
No, I
but
think it would be-
he keeps giving us numbers and reality, so yeah.
I think there would be plenty of opportunity to apply it in the future.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the work that you've done, and we appreciate all you guys doing that.
Bruce, can you hear me? I just wanted to make sure that is there any way for us to reach out to one of the agencies that does the sponsorship bidding to see what the process is, so we can try to include that in our potential income?
You mean for grant application?
No, for the sponsorship for someone to
Naming
have the
rights.
naming rights of the
For
pool.
sponsorship? I suspect that would be a RFP.
Or call rich people and see if they'll do it. I'm serious, I mean, I don't think it's.
Well, do we have a ballpark of, is it making us $10,000 a year or $1 million?
Well, that's what I'm saying, is like, how do we know what the potential could be like? I mean,
Well, we can
So-
call other communities and to get an idea of what, so we can definitely put that forward.
Put the colored cuts.
But if you're talking about getting a little bit firmer numbers or doing, a solicitation, that would.
We're not there yet.
Yeah, no, just a ballpark, if, we're gonna get $250,000 a year, or like Commissioner Stokes just said, we're gonna get $600,000 a year for naming rights to an oceanfront park, oceanfront pool.
It would have to be a lot.
Yeah.
It would have to be a lot. I'm thinking Jimmy Buffett. He loves this area.
Don't you know some wealthy people, Madam Mayor?
I do, but that's why they're rich. That's a joke. So.
Got it.
Okay, so you have your marching papers. Juan wants to say something. What would you like to say, Juan?
Sorry, go ahead, Madam Mayor.
No, I'm asking you to speak.
Oh, I wanted to share a document. I think you guys have all seen it. Are you seeing?
That's the pier.
We love that
We
picture.
love the pier. It's pretty.
What about,
We should put it in the pool.
see this now?
Put the pool on
It's
it.
really small.
Oh, we can't see that.
How's that?
All right. What is this from? What is this?
All right, I've shared this document with everyone, but this document is probably 4 or 5 years old. But this is just to reiterate that in and out into the community that you guys are doing a good job of advancing the conversation. And this kind of helps lay out the process from concept to execution. And really it's 6 steps. And I just wanted to point out again, we've gone through the first 2 steps. We got almost through the 3rd step out of 6 steps to make this project come to fruition. So it's just kind of reiterating where we're at in this timeline, and it's not that we're not making decisions because you made one tonight to move forward. But in the grand scheme of it, there's essentially 6 steps that we got to get through before we get to, cut a ribbon. So we're kind of
Could
in.
you email that to us again, Juan? Could you?
Yes.
email that? Okay.
Absolutely. And if you can hear it tonight, step 4, public survey and preliminary design schematics, refine design to align with needs and
Right.
budget, refine estimate. And again, public meeting, this is not number 3. This is, there's been a lot more, but this was just kind of help to guide when we first started this conversation 4 years ago. What are the steps? And you've heard me talk about, we're still far away from getting to construction documents.
Yeah.
Okay. And then along the way, there are task orders that are issued to CPZ. So there's not one encompassing a task order because, we've made a decision to take this in bite-sized pieces along this path. All right. So I just wanted to kind of share that. I'll email this to you guys again. You probably remember seeing it, but this will also help the public understand this isn't a decision that's made in 30 or 60 days. There's a lot of thought and time that goes into this.
And the pool's been closed for many years, so we're doing progress. And so from that, it sounds like, Juan, we're actually, even though it's later in time than we'd like this to be, we're on a pretty good path of progress.
Absolutely.
We are. We took essentially almost a 2-year break because of the pandemic and then elections and just so much going on. So we're picking up, kind of where we, left off.
Okay, so finance is gonna do what they're gonna do. We're gonna look at our own wish list and kind of define them. Mr. Zimmerman's gonna come back to us with a proposal.
Mhm.
And
We'll pick a date.
we'll pick a date and we're just gonna keep moving. And for those folks out there that say, oh, you can't make a decision, you go back and forth. This is about one of the most important decisions that a commission is gonna make in this. I mean, they made a decision in 1913 or 20 to have a pool. And now we're revisiting that. So I ask patience and it's, yeah,
Madam Mayor,
sure.
also to go off into another connection with this,
Mhm.
keep in mind that we're going to have a visioning session in April,
Mhm.
somewhere at that time. And so we're going to have discussions about what we want to look like
Mhm.
1 year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. Who are we and what we want to be in that time frame? And so those decisions as we talk through the strategic plan or the strategic priorities, this all ties into that, into our economic development efforts, into our marketing efforts, into even our tourism. Our tourism master plan report will be coming back soon.
Right.
And that will be coming back most likely around I think we're going to schedule that for the February 15th.
Right.
So when you see here that report, you start visioning ideas about Lake Worth Beach, who we want to be, how far we want to get into encouraging tourism, and what would make that happen. And certainly the beach complex is part of that big picture. And so it'll start flowing and connecting into our strategic plan and priorities and vision as we go down the line.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're getting in sort of getting to reimagine some of the things that, you know, Lake Worth, and I've known Lake Worth since 1967. And, you know, we do still maintain the basic elements of what we love about Lake Worth is the small town atmosphere. People know each other, you know, we're not mini mansions, we're not HOAs, we are pretty, we go to the ends, we stretch the limits from time to time. And that's, I think that's part of what we all treasure about the city.
Absolutely.
So,
That's why we have the budget we have.
So thank you, Commissioner Robinson. Madam City Clerk, do you have a public comment?
I do, Madam Mayor, I have two.
Okay, would you read that, please?
The first is from Brenda Mikado at 3000 Lake Osborne Drive, number 209, Lake Worth, Florida. It says, I am for the pool restoration. I love Todd Townsend's ideas, but instead of only 2 lap lanes, we need 4.
Thank you. Next.
The second comment is from Jenny Powell at 224 North Palmway. And it says, Dear Mayor Resch and City Commissioners, thank you for scheduling today's workshop with CPZ architects and others to move the city to the next step in the process to build a modern, attractive pool. I still have concerns about using the full ITN process to build the pool, and I believe there are unforeseeable pitfalls if you choose that path. Yes, we may get a developer to eventually build us a nice pool that way, but they are not going to do it without receiving something substantial in return. Whatever it is, it will have to turn a major profit for the developer. While none of us can see the future, I envision it would be something big that would require the city to give up control over some portion of our beach complex property for the next 30 years. A very scary scenario. I believe that the full RFP process is the fastest and safest way to get the pool to construction. First, identify the specific features you want, which I hope you do today. Reference the features CPZ has already identified for pool scheme A1 in its plan. Then I suggest you continue to work with CPZ or similar entity to develop engineering specifications and a bid package. When the bids come back, there will be opportunities to adjust the numbers based on available funding. This way, I believe the pool could be under construction by September 2022. How do we pay for it? My understanding is there is some portion of the city share of the penny sales tax, about 20 million over 10 years, set aside for pool construction. Has that changed? I don't know, but it seems fair for the citizens of Lake Worth Beach to expect that a portion of that 20 million windfall. I'm sorry, my time is up.
Your time is up. Sorry, Jenny, we got most of it in there. Okay, I read the email, right? And we have 2 cards. Mario Caprini? First state your name, your address, the town that you live in, and you got 2 minutes.
Sure. Mario Caprini, 876 Alamanda Street in Boca Raton. I'm a developer and I do want to work with the city of Lake Worth. So I want the commission and mayor to consider alternate approaches. The way I've been following this project for over 2 years, almost close to 3, I've attended a lot of the meetings and took the notes on the wish list on the last meeting that you had. We, as a team, have a different approach than most. We are a team that will not design something for you. We will design it based on your criteria and what you want, and you will review it as we do it. So when you don't like a box somewhere, you say, erase that box, move it 3 feet, move it that way. Our approach costs you $0. We have the track record, the financial strength, the history, and the experience to put together a proposal where we help the city plan, we design, we build with the city. We don't tell you what to do. We design what you want, and that includes the public. We will manage. You will never give up control of the pool or the property or anything of that. You're not leasing us the land. We will fully fund the project. We will manage the improvements on the project, and we provide all of the income streams. This is our strength. We provide the income stream, so at the end of the day, it costs the city zero. This is not free. We will make our money. It will be included in the package, but we have the skill set that's different than most people's skill set. You have yours, we have ours. I want the commission to be open to meet with us. We have, just based on what you've said, a 23-page preliminary discussion that I would like to have individually, just so we respect the sunshine law. And so that we can explain possible solutions to all of the problems you have.
Thank you. I have a question for the attorney. Meeting individually with Mr. Caprini, is that okay as long as we disclose it?
Yes, Madam Mayor, you can meet with him if at some point the city were to put out a proposal. The code of silence would only start once the deadline. for proposals
Sure,
are due.
but we're free to talk
So
now.
you could meet one-on-one and chat with them.
Okay.
Just like if there's other similar developers out there that want to sit down and
Sure.
talk to you about how they would approach the project.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that for everybody and Todd Townsend, I'm sorry.
So I've been working on this project for a long time, a number of years, and everything that is on my pages answers all of the questions that people have been talking about for years. So right off the top, my pool is pretty much the same pool that we have. It's going to be the least expensive pool because it's in the same footprint. You don't have to do a lot of extra work. My pool covers all the ADA things that a city pool is going to need. And I won't talk about all those things. You've all got these to look at. So it's very basic. Same pool, same footprint, spend the less money that you know, we don't have money, we want a cheap pool, than the same pool that we have with some extra things. So then my overall plan, which you also have, that covers everything that the whole beach is looking for, such as do something about the casino building, the pool, and the coveted space at the south end of the dune that the big money people are very interested in. We want to have our historic rectangle replaced. We don't want some new cool stuff, whatever. I'm sure it'll be cool, but let's replace our historic rectangle. So I want to ask a question. Do we need to be number one in electric? I mean, it's a lot of money. They got separate meetings for the electric. We're trying to build a pool here. Another way for us to make money is to sell the blocks at the square, the bricks at the square, burn people's names in them for $100 and make thousands and thousands of dollars. So that's pretty much it. I hope everybody will look closely at these because it does cover everything that everybody's been talking about for years. Because I've been here watching this 4 years. I've been working on this for years. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we're doing pretty good. It's on 7:30? 6:30.
6:30.
I don't have my glasses on. Gotta keep up my. Are we done for tonight? I think we all pretty much have I think, again, we all want, time is very frustrating and process is very frustrating, but I think that we all agree that this is something, and Commissioner Maligue, I want to see you shake your head, that we all agree that the process is important. Commissioner Stokes has a final comment for the night. The last light.
As we're trying to take this next step forward with the pool, can we also be trying to look at what we can do with that upstairs space? So I know it's been mentioned or suggested by others that usually we do issue an ITN for that, or try to get that out into the community and actively see what potential that, because I know Juan said maybe $12 or $15 a square foot is typical, but how do we get interest in
Yeah,
That-
I think, and I think one of the challenges, and I've spoken with a couple of people, you know, who have asked about the upstairs, and one of the challenges that we're going to have is parking. You know, if the increase, if the second floor starts increasing in because the parking lot's pretty full most
Right,
of the time.
unless
so-
like, I don't know, a breakfast joint goes up there or something, you know, who knows, right? There's parking is really hot during certain hours and there's really low during other hours,
Right.
so
Um,
that could be factored into it.
Are you okay with just like, let's focus on the pool right now and then with the, that's a question. It's not a discussion.
Yeah, well, because I know it's been mentioned, like, let's see about the whole beach complex or, so it's something that we do need to address, for sure.
Absolutely. And I think that's why when the staff first brought something to us, it was, it was smart that they split it up to, you know, A, B, or A and B,
Mhm.
or none of the above. So, oh, I see another
No-
light on.
No invitation to negotiate
We're not there yet.
creativity.
I'll meet with Mario.
I'm talking about getting a cost estimate for a pool. That's the decision tonight.
I don't know if I'd characterize it quite like that, but I think our next step is.
My time wasn't wasted.
What?
You know, I would like to think that's something that we can take away from this conversation.
We're taking the next
It
step
is,
in
we're
that
going
whole
forward.
process that Lon showed us. We're moving from step 3 to step 4.
Yeah.
That sounds like progress to me.
Madam Mayor, are we gonna try to do a Saturday meeting or I didn't hear the city manager finish her comment about
I think what-
scheduling that with Mr. Zimmerman.
I think that we left it with Mr. Zimmerman's going to give us a,
Proposal.
and I don't know how long it's going to take to get that proposal. Once we get it, I think I'm fine with the weekend meeting if I'm around. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's.
We had to work with you with your weekends.
Yeah, so once we get to the proposal, we have to execute the proposal that causes his engagement to create that event.
Mr. Zimmerman, about what would your time frame be to get us your proposal?
We need to reach out to our consultants as well. So within 2 weeks.
Okay. Oh, that's great. That's fine. That's reasonable. Thank you. Be kind. Do I have a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.